I would like to now proceed to Alain Vidal on the Food Security Committee. Alain is Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Consortium of International Agricultural Research Centers. Alain's interest in global food, environment and poverty issues spans over his entire career. Alain began his professional tenure in Morocco with the French Environment Research Institute, CEMAGREF, and he also worked for FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, before returning to CEMAGREF. In 2014, Alain was named Director of Strategic Partnerships. Alain received his PhD in water science from the University of Montpellier. Alain, you're passionate about food supply, as well as climate change. We will add another 2 billion people to this planet by the year 2050. And at the same time, we are facing ever more challenges when it comes to climate change in the next years and decades to come, particularly in the developing world. I'm looking forward to your deliberations on how food security and mitigating the carbon footprint can go hand in hand. Alain, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Barbara, and good morning to all. And I'd like to thank Jo also because she's introduced a few of the concepts that I'll be building upon. I was looking for a quite provocative title with Feeding the World or Greenwashing. I think there is the role for businesses in tackling food security and climate change, and not only leave it to the governments. But I'd like to start with a small quiz, if these work. Yes. Who knows who invented the concept of bricks? Goldman Sachs, exactly. Good answer. Most people think this was invented by universities somewhere in the US, but no, it was invented by the private sector. And I think it's a good example of the fact that when we consider globalization, and food security in particular, we have people who act, and most of the time you are the people who act, and there are people who think, most of the time the academia, but they don't have necessarily the means, the models, the data, the feet on the ground to really think about globalization. And I think we're facing the same issue with food security. So my question is, how can we, leaders of industries, but also leaders in science, design a sustainable pathway on food security and climate? And I think what I would like to focus on today is what we call climate smart agriculture as a way to combat climate change, but also to ensure prosperity of farmers and of agribusinesses. So, quick reminder that our food system is both a driver, that's 25% of the global emissions today, and a victim of climate change. It's 25% today, but it will be 50% of global emissions tomorrow in 2050 under a business as usual scenario if we reach a world at 2 degrees, meaning other sectors are on the pathway to decrease, but not our food system. But it's also the top sector which is affected by climate change, and beyond or before temperature increase, which has a sort of mathematical or physical yields, a physical decrease of 5% on all yields per degree of increase on global temperature. Climate variability is actually creating huge pressure on production and on food security and on supply chains of the businesses. And I've given here a few figures of how staple crops, but also added value crops like coffee, will be affected if we do nothing. So the cost of inaction is huge. So what is, in this perspective, climate smart agriculture? Well, climate smart agriculture, let me define by what it is not. It is not a chocolate box where you could pick up what you like, the chocolate you prefer, and you say, I'm going to mitigate my emissions, and this is climate smart. No, climate smart agriculture is a genuine choice of fostering mitigation, adaptation, and food security. And this is where the challenge lies. So, a few years ago, we gathered a few scientists, and at the time to wake up for you, a few scientists, researchers, practitioners, NGOs, private sector, government representatives, and say, what is our safe space in this diagram where you have food on the y-axis and climate change on the x-axis? And the safe space, which we are not, the black ball is already out of the safe space because we have 800 million of people starving of hunger and 2 billion people undernourished on the planet. So we have that major issue. We are already outside that safe zone, and that safe zone is actually limited by 3 boundaries. You have the top right boundary, which is how food production will decrease as a function of climate change. The bottom boundary is the pressure that is created by population increase, and I'm glad that there are people dealing with demography here. And the left boundary is the impact of agriculture on climate. So we have 3 ways to bring back the ball in the space. Well, first you could make the space bigger, and that's all which is related to changing our diets or reducing our food waste, and this will actually move that lower boundary down. Well, the other option is to reduce greenhouse gases from agriculture, and this would actually move the left boundary. Yeah, this is working. Sometimes technology meets what you want to do. Climate smart agriculture, why do we call it smart? Because actually it brings the ball in the safe space, so we can make the space bigger, but if we can move the ball back in that safe space, then we'll be pretty much better off than we are now. So this is where we would like climate smart agriculture to bring up the ball. Okay, so the question I think is, how can we move from greenwashing to climate smart solutions? Well, the first thing which I think is important when dealing with food security is that both climate change and food security are imposing onto our governments, our businesses, the questions that as researchers we are addressing, weak problems. And those weak problems are not going to be solved by simple solutions. So typical good solutions is good communication. For example, ban palm oil or impose a tax on palm oil. That doesn't work, and that diverts people, decision makers, investors from what the real issues are. So what science tries to do, or should try to do, because not all scientists do that, will be actually to help understand how these weak problems are guiding our systems. And of course, while we do good communication, while we imagine simple solutions which are fast, we are wasting time because, well, Joe mentioned the 1.5 degree, which was the dream in Paris, and the target is plus 2 degree, but plus 1.5 degree will be reached in 7 years. So for us dealing with food security, it means we have 7 more agricultural campaigns in temperate regions and 14 more agricultural campaigns in tropical regions. And so what we need to develop, and I think that goes beyond food security, is a public-private science dialogue. Coming back to palm oil, when people from an NGO which is based in Switzerland, which is called the Forest Trust, consider palm oil and the trade-off with deforestation, they actually realized that 50% of palm oil is produced from smallholders. And those smallholders, they cut more trees than the big industry, but only produce 20% of the potential. So the huge potential for both increasing businesses for the smallholders, for the retailers, but also to reduce the impact on the environment. Well, another idea, and when listening to our first speaker this morning, I was thinking, oh, that's the one which has the 4 eyes. It even has a fifth one because it's about insurance. It's about rediscovering in the developing world that what was one of the key tools to foster our crop yields increase and advances in agricultural technology in our industrialized world was insurance for farmers. And so enabling small farmers, and here in this case pastoralists, to have access to low-cost insurance is a key driver to change the fate of these people. And you see here the figures, and the graph on the bottom left shows you the balance between payouts and premiums. And local companies are making a business out of these small insurance for small pastoralists in Kenya and Ethiopia. I'd like to conclude with 3 messages which I think could easily go beyond food security. And it's about what science can bring to sustainable supply chains. I think we need more candid and transparent approaches to reconsider what the real issues are. I also think that science can help recreate value in supply chains, because we've often forgotten what a supply chain entails. And it goes beyond food security and agriculture, of course. It goes beyond food. And the third one is, if we do that, we'll find better ways of feeding people, feeding companies, and feeding the economy. And of course, that would be much more accepted than just greenwashing. And thank you for your attention.